In this part of our tutorial, we're just going to retrieve some button attributes. So in the previous part, we set them, so we set the title and the title color, and now we're going to retrieve whatever the current title and the current color is. And so we're going to get some of these attributes and store them in variables. Okay, so rather than saying the button name dot set title or set color to whatever, we're going to create this variable and set it equal to the button dot current title or current color. Okay, and we're going to display the attributes and see how they've changed in a label. So we're going to put these before we reset the title and color and after to see how the results change. Okay, so now we've seen how to set attributes for the button. So we saw how to set the title and set the title color. Now let's talk about how to retrieve them. So this is just going to be a fairly short part. We're just going to look at a couple of different things to retrieve. So we can call the name and then the function to set. In this case, these are going to be set title and set the title color. This time we need to get them. So we're going to need to store the results in some kind of a variable. Because if we just call, for example, we call btn button outlet dot and then something like current title, this will get the current title of the button, but it's giving us this warning: the expression of type string is unused. So it's better that we store this kind of content in a variable. So what we could say is variable title, in fact let's be specific, button title equals, and then here we go. And in fact, let's make that a constant. Oh, didn't want that. I'm fine with just the let. Okay, so again we get this warning, but this one's a different one. This is just saying that this is never used, but that's fine. All I want to do is demonstrate how to retrieve information from the button. Okay, so this is similar to what we saw in the labels tutorial. We basically just store the results of whatever we're retrieving in this variable. Now we haven't specified a type, and that's fine. We could specify a type if we want, and say it's of type string, but it doesn't really matter. And in fact, sometimes it's better not to specify a type, because some of these functions have kind of strange types that are not necessarily intuitive. Okay, so this function is basically just getting the title, so it's saying whatever the button btn button outlet's current title is, retrieve it and store it in this variable. So this was setting the title to Mammoth Interactive. This is now getting the title, which should be right now Mammoth Interactive, and storing it in button title. So button title should now contain the word, or rather the string, Mammoth Interactive. Okay, so that's how to get the title, and if we want some kind of proof, we can add in a quick label. So I'm just going to add one in now, just to demonstrate this. Just going to make it a little bit bigger, and then we're going to have to initialize it the same way we did with the button. So this hopefully should be kind of review to you guys. I'm just going to call this LBL label. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to say LBL label.text equals button title. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and run our app. Okay, well, it was already running, so I'm just going to stop it first and then run it. So for those of you who didn't watch the label tutorial, I just created a label variable the same way as we did with the button variable, or the button outlet variable at least, and I just called the text of this label and assigned it to contain this variable button title, which in our case should contain the string Mammoth Interactive. So if we, there we go, so our simulator loaded up, and as you can see, the label now contains Mammoth Interactive. And the reason being that we assigned the title to be Mammoth Interactive, and then we retrieved whatever the title was, stored it in button title, and then set the label text to contain that. Now I want to show you something different. What we're going to do is we're going to put this code above where we set the title. So I'm just going to cut it and paste it. Now let's see how it is different. because this is now retrieving the current title before we reassigned it. So if we stop this and rerun it, we'll see that the title is going to be something a little different. And just going to wait for it to load. Okay, I'm going to open it up, and there we go. So we see two different things appearing now. So the first is the button titles Mammoth Interactive, and the second is that the label contains interesting text. And this is because we already assigned this to contain a title in the attributes inspector itself. So right when we created our button and added it to the layout, we changed the attributes to contain interesting text as our button title. So that means unless it's changed in the code, this is what the title of the button will be. Now we did change it in the code, however we retrieved the title before we changed it. Okay, and this is why it's very important to keep track of where you're putting your variable declarations and where you're putting your functions. Because if we wanted our variable, or rather our label, to display the original button title, which is interesting text, we have to display it, or we have to assign this and display it before we reset the title to contain Mammoth Interactive. Okay, so that's just something interesting to note. And yeah, so now we can do something else. So let's just say, in fact, let's just call another function. We can say, and this one actually I'm going to put after the set titles and everything. So this one's going to be let button title color, and I'm going to set this equal to btn button outlet dot current title color. Okay, and then we're going to use this and say lbl label dot text color is equal to the button title color. Okay, so now we're going to retrieve whatever color the button currently contains. So because we put it after we reset the color to red, the button title color should be red, and we're just going to set the label text color to be red as well. So again, let's rerun this and see what happens. And it's just building, build succeeded, that's good, it's always good to see. And here we go, and so we get a red label text here. And that's because we retrieved the color after we set it to red. If we had put this code before, just after after we grab the button title and before we reset it, then it should be this blue color. Okay, and just to prove that to you, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to cut and paste it, and we're going to rerun it just to see the differences there. Okay, so again, very important to be careful about exactly where you're putting your code. There we go. See, the text color is now blue, whereas this one is red. And that's because we retrieved the current color before we reset the color to red. Okay, so this is how to retrieve information. I just showed you two different functions. So we set the title and set the title color in the previous part. Now we're retrieving the title and the title color and storing them in these variables. And I just use these variables to change the attributes of this label here. So changing label attributes should be something that you guys are pretty familiar with now. It's not so different from changing button attributes if you are not so familiar. And if you're still kind of confused about what's going on with this label, I strongly recommend that you check out our labels tutorial. Okay, so let's recap what we've learned so far in this part. We saw that we set the title and title color before. This part is just going to retrieve our title and our title color. So we saw these functions in two different parts. We saw them before, well, we saw them first after we set the title and title color, and then before. So if we call these, or rather if we set these variables to be equal to the title and the color before we reset it, then it will contain the original text and the original color. Once we saw that we assigned these variables after we set the title and color in the code, then it contains the new title and the new color. Okay, so this is how to retrieve attributes from our button. we just create a variable and set it equal to whatever our attribute that we're trying to retrieve is. And again, just be careful exactly where you're putting these kind of attributes, or where you're putting each function or each line within the code, because it can really change the outcome of what that variable is. Okay, so this next part will be looking at actually handling some button press events. Okay, so this part of our tutorial just looked at retrieving button attributes. So the previous part looked at how to set them, this looked at how to get them. So what we did is we got the current title and the text color of the button. First we looked at after we changed it, and then we looked at before we changed it. So we had our two set functions, and we first looked at retrieving the color and the text after we reset them, so we saw that it was red and it contained Mammoth Interactive, and then before we changed them we saw that it was blue and contained interesting text. Okay, and in this way we showed that it's very important to pay attention to where in the code we're assigning these variable values, because we saw that the title and the title color were very different before and after we set them. So this is, in this case it's pretty obvious, but it might not always be so obvious, and it can really mess up your code if you're not careful about where exactly you're assigning these values.